Motorhead was a war machine on wheels, and Fast Eddie Clarke was riding shotgun, chain smoking, barking orders, and reloading the ammo himself. You got Lemmy on the bass, Filthy Animal on the drums, and then there's Clarke, this wild-eyed, blues-drenched maniac with a Les Paul slung low like a holstered weapon. He attacked that guitar like there was no tomorrow. And this was the lineup, the one that burned through the late 70s and early 80s. Clarke was smack in the middle of this unholy trinity that gave us Overkill, Bomber, Ace of Spades, 3 albums that didn't ask for permission, didn't apologize, and certainly did not leave any survivors. 2 of them dropped in the same year, and Ace of Spades was basically their way of saying, we're not here to make friends. Clarke's guitar was not flashy, it was filthy, it snarled, and it bit. Sounded like the bastard child of Chuck Berry and a chainsaw. But he never lost the plot, and underneath all that raw speed and punk vitriol, you could still hear the ghost of rock and roll's greasy roots. The blues was still in there, duct taped to the engine block and screaming down the freeway. And then came No Sleep Till Hammersmith in '81. The only time Motörhead actually ever hit number 1 on the UK albums chart. And it was a live album. No polish or overdubs, just carnage caught on tape. And that was Clarke's guitar turning every amp into a confession booth for sins nobody ever regretted. But by '82, the whole damn thing detonated. Lemmy wanted to do a record with Wendy O. Williams from the Plasmatics. Clarke said, don't do it, man. Lemmy did it anyway. Boom, Clarke walks. He said it wasn't just their band, it was his too. And they didn't even wait for him to put his coat on. The betrayal was deep, like knife in the back during a sound check kind of deep. Years later, and Lemmy's got no illusions. He said Fastway had a lousy singer and didn't think the album was hot shit, but it still tipped the hat. Eddie was always a good player. Not polite praise or nostalgia, just the truth, the kind that stings a bit. So Fast Eddie Clarke didn't leave quietly. He left with fire in his gut and scars that didn't scab over easy. But even when the dust settled, his name stayed inked into Motörhead's DNA. So Clarke walks out of Motörhead with that kind of rage that calcifies. He's pissed, totally bruised, but he actually has a plan. And he decides no more breakneck speed metal. This time, he's going to build something that's his. More bluesy, heavy, swaggering. Something that swung instead of just smashing heads open all the time. Less trench warfare, more barroom brawl with a jukebox groaning in the background. So he links up with Pete Way from UFO. A guy who played bass like he was late for a court date. These 2 maniacs slap their names together. Fast Eddie and Pete Way. Fastway. And for a moment, it actually looks like this Frankenstein might walk. They got a CBS deal. They've roped in Jerry Shirley from Humble Pie to bash the drums, and they even pull this kid out of Dublin named Dave King. Skinny, hungry, could sing the roof off a meth lab. And then, like every great bar fight story, somebody disappears. Pete Way gets pulled, ripped right out of the lineup before the first damn track is cut. Turns out, Chrysalis Records had him chained up like a mob debt. And then, just to rub dirt in the wound, Sharon Osbourne comes waltzing in with a golden ticket. Hey, come play with Ozzy. And Pete, he totally takes the bait. Fastway loses away. Eddie, years later, basically says that Sharon Osbourne came in like a hit woman, snatched Pete out from under him, and left a half-built band smoking in the rubble. But here's the twist. Way never laid down a single note, never played a show, but his name still stamped on the merch like a ghost signature. And the guy who did play bass on that first album, Mickey Feet, total pro, a ghost, didn't get any credit, just walked in, held the whole bottom end together, and slipped back into the shadows like a session ninja. And through all of this, Clarke doesn't fold. He tightens the grip, lights another smoke, and leans in harder. Fastway wasn't dead, just bleeding a bit. And Clarke, he had already bled before. This was just Tuesday. And so it's 1983, and Eddie Clarke standing there with a chip on his shoulder the size of a Marshall stack, dragging Fastway across the finish line by sheer willpower alone. No Pete Way or guarantees, just a fistful of riffs and a dream that stank of beer and desperation. And out of that chaos, Fastway, the debut album. They didn't half-ass it. They brought in Eddie Kramer, the guy who made Hendrix sound like a thunderstorm, Led Zeppelin's secret weapon, a man whose ears should be insured for more than most football players. So this record sounded like it meant business. Gritty as a truck stop ashtray, but slick enough to sneak into FM radio. And the bones were blues rock, but the blood still had Motörhead coursing through it. And Clarke didn't fully ditch the rage. That Motörhead DNA clung to him like a hangover you just cannot sweat out. But instead of barreling full speed into your face, he channeled it, let it simmer. His guitar tone didn't just bite, it grinned while it did it. Still thick and mean, but it had that swagger to it. Didn't need to prove that it could take you out, it just knew. Easy Livin', Say What You Will. These songs smacked you upside the head while simultaneously torching your local neighborhood radio station. MTV grabbed them, radio spun them. Suddenly, Clarke's new band, this Frankenstein blues hard rock hybrid, was on the charts. UK, number 43. US, number 31 on Billboard. Total victory parade, considering the train wreck behind the scene. Then you had We Become One and Another Day. More than filler, they're concrete, part of the foundation. And Fastway's early live sets hit hard, loose but lethal at the same time. And Fast Eddie Clarke was back, grinning through clenched teeth, proving that Motörhead didn't break him, they unleashed him. And it wasn't some sad post-breakup solo trip. This was a rebirth. Louder, hairier, and definitely much more dangerous than before. So next up comes All Fired Up in 1984. Fastway's rolling in hot. Their first album made some noise, MTV liked them, the US did not slam the door in their face, and now Clarke's thinking, hell yeah, let's double down. So they crank out the second record, and boom, again, number 31 on the Billboard 200, like clockwork. It's not about the numbers, it's about pure grit. Fastway starts grinding through the states like a barbed wire bulldozer, opening for the Scorpions and Rush, two bands with fan bases the size of small nations. That's no opening act gig, it's combat training. You're walking into coliseums full of stoned arena warriors and earning your keep every single night, and Fastway brought it. No pomp or laser shows, just Clarke's guitar screaming through the smoke and Dave King belting like he's trying to punch a hole in the sky. But while the front looked solid, the backstage was leaking fuel. Clarke, already a guy with trust issues after the Motorhead fallout and the Pete Way Vanishing Act, starts turning on Eddie Kramer. The guy who gave them their killer debut now, according to Clarke, just kind of mailed it in on this one. Said the production was flat, limp, neutered, terrible. That's in his own words. It's like dragging a tiger into the studio and it comes out sounding like a house cat with asthma. That's how Clarke felt. And he said that Kramer just didn't care anymore. No fire or edge, just another gig, and Clarke wasn't in the mood to play nice. And maybe the criticism has a bit of teeth. I mean, you crank up All Fired Up, and it's a great album. Very solid. It's got guts, and the songs are great. But something sonically is missing. Didn't quite hit like the first one. Songs are there, the band's tight, the charts still played along, but the sound doesn't punch, it pats. And for a guy like Clarke, who spent years building a career out of punches, that was blasphemy. So on the surface, Fastway was cooking, but under the hood, the engine was starting to smoke. 1985 rolls around. Fastway are already dancing on the edge of chaos, decide to throw the damn map out the window and swerve into a whole new lane. Clarke's got that itch again, that restless gunslinger syndrome, the kind that hits guys who've been on the top, got burned, and still haven't learned to sit still. And so he torches the lineup like it's old furniture and builds a new band out of scraps from Dave King's old crew, Stillwood. Enter Shane Carroll on rhythm guitar, Paul Reed on bass, Alan Connor behind the kit. Fresh blood, young, eager, probably didn't know they were walking into a musical minefield with Clarke holding the detonator. And the album, Waiting for the Roar. And it was a roar, but like from a well-trained lion at a theme park. Thing had polish, it had sheen, it was clean, too clean. Clarke ditched the grit and dove headfirst into AOR land, album-oriented rock, where everything's radio-friendly, chorus-heavy, and your guitar tone has to pass a background check. This was Fastway with its shirt tucked in, and the fans were not digging it at all. The dirt was gone. The danger was gone. Clarke had traded his rusty crowbar for a Bed Bath & Beyond gift card, and the people who showed up for the bar fight didn't want to hear ballads with keyboards tucked in the back. Still, somehow they land a European stadium tour with AC/DC. It's like getting dumped, but still scoring a date with your ex's hotter sister. So they're playing to tens of thousands of sweaty rock fans every night, riding the lightning bolt of AC/DC's Fly in the Wall tour. And yeah, they definitely held their own. Fastway never lacked guts on stage. But the album was not selling. Not like before. What Clarke called evolution, the fans heard as compromise. And rock and roll, compromise is just another way for saying a slower way to die. So now it's 1986, and Fastway's limping out of the AOR experiment like a prizefighter who tried yoga and blew out a hamstring. They're looking for a comeback, something dirty, loud, and raunchy. And then, Trick or Treat comes knocking. The heavy metal horror flick that was supposed to be a satanic Back to the Future for headbangers. Ozzy Osbourne plays a televangelist. Gene Simmons shows up as a radio DJ. It's got flaming guitars, undead rock stars, enough hairspray to blow up a shopping mall. And of course, it flopped harder than a Viagra trial on a senior nap day. Box office was DOA. Critics shrugged. Audiences were totally confused. The VHS box probably saw more action at Blockbuster than the theaters ever did. But the soundtrack? That's where the real possession happened. Clarke brings the heat. Trick or Treat, the album that goes hard. Not just new songs, but recycled Fastway tracks like Heft, If You Could See, now much more weaponized and sharpened. The title track really hits hard. No ballads or pretense, just chainsaw riffs and King's voice slicing through the smoke like he's trying to outsing the devil. And here's the twist. Even though the movie tanked, the album did not. Snuck onto the Billboard 200 at 156 and just would not leave. 11 months. That is not normal. That's voodoo. A horror movie soundtrack that outlasts actual rock albums? Who would have thunk it? Over in Australia, 2 years later, it ends up catching fire. In 1988, hits number 35, and the cult around the soundtrack starts growing fangs. Critics calling it a hard rock masterpiece, the kind of phrase usually reserved for Zeppelin or Sabbath, not a movie tie-in from a film where a demon kills people through a guitar amp. And then, exit Dave King. Mic drop. Last hurrah. After screaming through the album like his soul was on fire, he ends up splitting. Doesn't go solo, or fade into obscurity. He actually does a real hard pivot. He forms the band Flogging Molly, going from leather and studs to Guinness and fiddles. Celtic punk, Irish rebellion with distortion pedals. So Trick or Treat? Yeah, the movie might have sucked, but the soundtrack, that was the exorcism that Clarke did not know he needed. The last time Fastway truly felt like a gang again, right before it all fractured for good. So by the time Dave King bailed, after torching the mic on Trick or Treat and then moonwalking straight into Celtic punk history, Fastway was basically Clarke and a pile of empty beer bottles. But again, Clarke was not ready to let that beast die. Not yet. Not while he still had calluses on his fingers. Enter 1988, Clarke relaunches Fastway. He recruits a new frontman, Leah Hart, a guy with pipes, but not the same raw napalm that Dave King brought. And the band? Pretty much non-existent. It's Clarke, Hart, and a revolving door of session players. At this point, Fastway's less of a gang and more of a Craigslist ad. The first album out of this Frankenstein's lab was On Target, and it missed. Completely. No impact. No buzz, barely a blip. It showed up, coughed once, and vanished into the void. For Fastway fans who were completely excited about this whole reboot, all of a sudden found themselves embarrassed right when the first song started playing. 2 years later, they try again with Bad Bad Girls, a title that sounds like a B-movie on Cinemax at 2 a.m., and they even rope in players from the band Girl School to try to spike more adrenaline into the veins, but it's just DOA again. Nothing stuck. The riffs just were not dangerous anymore. The fire was out. Clarke, the guy who just made Motorhead sound mean, was now fumbling around with studio polish and really soft punches. And then when you think they packed it in, 1991 coughs up a live album, Say What You Will, live. But it's not even new. It's just a hodgepodge of older recordings from when the band still had teeth. Even more twisted, Dave King's voice is all over it, the guy who left years ago. Meanwhile, Hart is the current frontman. Looking at the track list like, what the hell, man? Total identity crisis. Like showing up to your own wedding and realizing the video montage is just your fiance's ex-boyfriend playing acoustic love songs. And the whole thing reeked of a band that just didn't know what it was anymore. Not dead, not alive, just wandering. And after that, total silence. No big breakup announcement or farewell tour. They just kind of slowly evaporate. But here's the thing about rock and roll. Nothing's ever over for good. We know this one by how many farewell tours bands have. Some of them have like 15 of them. And really just not if there's one amp left and one guy still pissed off enough to plug it in. So now it's 1998. Fast Eddie Clarke's back in the saddle with Leah Hart, trying to jumpstart the Fastway corpse on his third lightning bolt. And they actually dig up On Target, the album that completely face-planted a decade earlier, and try to give it a facelift. Smoother production, shinier mix. This turd was polished and shining bright, probably hoping the ghosts of the 80s might finally stop laughing. But there was much more going against them. I mean, it's 1998. We're deep in the era of backwards caps, 7-string guitars, dudes screaming about their dads over detuned riffs, Korn is king, Limp Bizkit is spray painting cock and balls all over MTV, and somewhere in Seattle, grunge is rotting beautifully. It's all angst and Adidas at this point. And into that arena, Clarke is going to drop a reanimated 80s hard rock album like it's going to change the weather? Spoiler, it does not. Nobody wants it. Not the old fans, too tired, not the new kids who are busy digging on Deftones lyrics. It's just one more missed shot. One more almost. and Clarke's trying to revive something that the world moved on from while he wasn't looking. And just like that, the lights flicker. The band vanishes again. So now by 2007, Fastway was mummified, pickled almost as bad as Keith Richards himself, buried under flannel shirts and forgotten festival flyers and more failed comebacks than anybody wanted to count. But then, out of nowhere, boom, resurrection again. And this time, it actually clicked. Enter Toby Jepson, former frontman of Little Angels and a guy with a voice like gravel soaked in gas. Not just a hired gun, this guy shows up basically with fire in his gut and something that he wants to prove. And Clarke, for the first time in decades, is grinning again. Like he's finally found the right lunatic to hold the mic. So you got the new gang, Clarke on guitar, Jepson up front, drummer Steve Strange, not the eyeliner magician from Visage. This one actually hits like a Demolition Crew. John McManus on bass, from Mama's Boys, bringing some Irish muscle to the bottom end. See that full circle? Very interesting. They stormed through Europe like they had a score to settle. Sweden Rock, Hard Rock Hell, Castle Donington, Download Festival. And it's real turf, not the nostalgia circuit. They weren't dragging Fastway's corpse on stage. They're beating it back to life with a crowbar. And it really wasn't a victory lap. Clarke finally had a singer who didn't just fill space, he lit it on fire. Jepson had range and swagger and that bulldog bark that Clarke's riffs had been waiting for since Dave King split. And it wasn't just an old hit revival. They were actually writing again. Brand new songs, new attitude. Fastway was back. And fast forward to 2011, 20 years since Fastway dropped anything that didn't smell like a rerun. And now finally, Eddie Clarke's dropping a new album in his hands that doesn't make him wince. Eat Dog Eat. And this wasn't a cash grab or a rehash. It was brand new, co-written with Toby Jepson, the only guy since Dave King who could match Clarke's riffs. And Clarke straight up called it classic rock at its best. And the critics dug it. The thing was heavy and muscular. Leave the Light On was pure highway adrenaline. Sick as a Dog had riffs that felt like they'd been marinating in motor oil since 1983. But then, right when it should have mattered, poof, gone. Jepson bails. No tour or follow-through. Instead, he reunites with Little Angels. That's like escaping Alcatraz, swimming through shark-infested water, and then voluntarily walking back through the front gate. Clarke was crushed, totally devastated. The guy thought he'd finally rebuilt the engine, fired it up, took it for a test drive, and then watched as the damn wheels fall off again. And Eat Dog Eat didn't tank. It just never really had the chance to live. One more high note cut short. One more Fastway flame snuffed out before it could actually catch fire. A killer album, but a ghost show. And for Clarke, it felt like it was the last card he had to play. And by 2015, time wasn't just catching up with Fast Eddie Clarke, it was hunting him down. Lemmy dies. Filthy Animal dies. It wasn't just two obits in the magazine, that was family. That was the old gang, the classic lineup, three-headed beast that once set the world on fire with Overkill and Bomber and Ace of Spades. And now it was just Clarke left, standing in the ashes with his guitar and a haunted look in his eyes. And that kind of grief doesn't whisper, it screams. So Clarke straps in one last time. Fastway hits the road again, UK Tour 2015, with Saxon and Girl School tagging along like it's a new wave of British heavy metal class reunion. And Toby, he's back on the mic, the one Clarke trusted. And the tour turned out awesome. Total celebration. And Clarke was right back in his element. But then just as fast as he came back, January 10th, 2018, Eddie Clarke is gone. Pneumonia, 67 years old. And with that, the original Motörhead lineup is officially extinct. No survivors. 2 years later, Pete Way, his Fastway partner who never got to play a damn note, joins them. Another one gone. And that idea of Fastway, the Frankenstein band that never fully worked but always had potential, well, now that's buried too. And Jepson, the last real torchbearer, said it plain and simple. Called Clarke a giant of a man, an old school player who literally changed the musical landscape. And that's basically what Eddie Clarke was. He was a lifer. Street soldier or rock and roll. He didn't just play music, he bled it. And even when the wheels fell off, he kept the engine running just to see how far the damn thing could go. And that's the thing about Eddie Clarke, was that he was never trying to be some spotless, Berkeley certified fretboard gymnast. That wasn't his religion. He didn't give a damn about precision. He just cared about the impact. Solos weren't surgical strikes. He just wanted them to wreck the place. His tone, guttural all the way. Basically what a good Marshall stack was meant for. To scream and chortle. And with Motörhead, he played a big hand in getting speed metal off the ground. That manic, full throttle, pedal to the floor insanity. It's got Clarke's fingerprints all over it. And instead of trying to keep up with the beat, he was trying to outrun it. And Fastway was a whole other animal. That was him slipping into a different skin, pulling back on the throttle, letting that swing breathe. Bluesier, groovier, still heavy, still snarling, but now it had hips. Moved different. Less drag you through the dirt and more make you dance in it. And on those first couple albums, especially the debut album and Trick or Treat soundtrack, that guitar still set fire to the curtains, just in a different room. Did Fastway ever hit the stratosphere like Motörhead? Nope, but that wasn't the point. They built something stubborn, cult classic status. The kind of band you discover in a dusty record bin or catch ripping a festival slot you didn't expect. They outlived the trends, survived lineup disasters, label neglect, bad timing, worse luck, and they kept coming. Not for the fame, but for the fight. Eddie Clarke never once played it safe. Didn't matter if there were 5 people in the crowd or 50,000. He just plugged in and let it rip. And that guitar was his sweaty middle finger to the world, whether the world gave a crap or not. To my subscribers, thank you so much. You friggin' rock. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, plug that guitar right into the subscribe button, let it rip, turn around, kick the bass drum pedal on the like button, join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.